Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
Hi everyone, Sue here from 1A Auto, and today we're going to be installing our transmission mount on our 07 Mazda 6 sedan with a 2.3 liter. This mount came from 1A Auto, so if you need this part or any other part for your car, click on the link below. Come on over to 1A Auto. As you can see, we removed the hood, and you don't have to do that for any of the procedures. We just did it so easy videotaping so you guys get a clearer picture. So now I'm going to disconnect the negative battery cable, then the positive, because we have to discard the battery to remove it to get to the training mount. Negative first, set that aside, and I'm going to go positive. This is a 10mm wrench. Lift that up. I always cover it with the boot, it's just a habit. So I have two 10mm here, and I'm going to get a socket to do those. If you undo this side of the bracket first, you really don't have to undo the threaded rod. You can loosen it a little bit just to help mounting, but don't take that all the way out because it just comes unhooked when you lift this handle up. I'm going to put the bolt back in so that way I don't lose it. Now you just unhook it from the plastic, set it aside. This battery has handles, so that's nice of them. Lift it up. I'm going to dismount the battery holding tray. That is two 10mm socket nuts. Okay, let's see if we lift this thing up. There seems to be a part of the, you can see the cable, the harness. It's got an attachment bracket on this. So you can't really see the mounting bolts, so I'm going to disconnect it by the harness, undo this clamp where it mounts on the actual bracket. So this part was strapped around the main harness, so all I did was take a small screwdriver, pull that tab out like this. When you do that, this will lift up. You see the two notches, and that's how it reattaches. So lift that tab up and pull up. That way you can move the tray. I'm going to pinch down on the mass airflow sensor connector and release it from the mass airflow sensor. It just pushes in here on this airbox cover, just guide the little harness out. We need to disconnect the air injection hose. So these two blue tabs, they have ears on them, so you squeeze them together and twist the hose off. I'm going to disconnect the clamp on the throttle body to the airbox. That air tube is connected to the air filter housing, and that is a 10mm socket I'm using. Just need to loosen it up enough so that we can wiggle that hose off. Once the air hose is disconnected from the throttle body, this whole air box is mounted on rubber bushings down below. Just grab it firmly and lift up. We're going to remove the transmission mount, and when doing that, or any other mount in a car, it's a good idea to take a look over the whole situation, go underneath, and see if you need to support the engine or the transmission. In this case, I do need support this transmission, so I'm going to put a floor jack from down below and just hold the transmission in place while I undo the mount. I always like to use a piece of wood, especially when it comes to going up against a tin pan or the aluminum casing. I'm going to take a guide and see where I need to catch it. This particular model does not have anything exposed except for the pan. And actually I have a point right here, aluminum housing right before it meets the engine. I'm going to mount it on that, because the tin pan can crush, and you don't want that at all. So let's just put enough tension on it. I'm not jacking the car up. We just want tension there, so when I undo that mount, the transmission doesn't drop down. Dismounting the main bolt that goes through, it's a 15mm socket. It's probably about a 6-inch bolt, and I still have my trainee jack down below holding the support of the engine. If I didn't, there'd be pressure on this right now, and this would be like really hard to turn. I can leave that connected if I wanted to, or take it completely out, whichever's easy, because I'm going to dismount the 3 mounting bolts. We've got one nut here, one here, and one here. So it's 3 mounting nuts on studs that come out of the transmission. And then I'm going to undo 2 bottom bolts here, one here, and one looks just like that in the back side. And these 2, I'm going to take the whole unit out so that you can see the 2 studs below that have nuts on it, and the 3rd one here, so we can dismount it on the floor, take it apart and put it together. This is the nut for the main bolt that goes through, has a counterweight on it, and it's welded on a bracket. So now that that's unthreaded from that, I can set that aside. Because it's a long bolt, I can leave it in there because it will fall right out once the mounts come out. So I'm going to undo the 3 nuts on the transmission side now. These are 17mm socket. Loosen all 3 of them at the same time. Usable 1/2-inch ratchet now. So here's the back one with the nut, and it's a spacer that's tapered. You find that a lot in anything sometimes when it's steel against aluminum. It's kind of a nice design. And 2 more to go. You can see that there's a harness clip here on this mount, so I'm just going to take a pair of needle nose pliers and just poke that out of the way. Now that bracket part is ready to come off. I can discard the long bolt. See if I can get this out of here. Now with that part of the mount off and out of the way, this is what we're trying to access, are these 2 studs that come out of the motor mount with the nuts and washers. So I think now that this bracket's out of the way, we can use a socket, ratchet, or a large wrench. Break that free. Okay, now I have better access to that back nut. It's a 15mm. Yeah, that big bracket mounted to the transmission was definitely easier to take out and get out of the way. These 2 mounting bolts, they're 15mm socket. So I'm just going to break those free. And we'll do the back one. Last one is going to be this 13mm nut on the stud of the mount. And you can see the mount already wiggling. And then that's it. We're going to just lift this up. Here we have the motor mount, or trainee mount, shall I say, from 1aauto.com. And this is the OE, original equipment one we just took out. You see the one from 1A Auto. It comes with the exact studs in place, new nuts and flat washers all around. This is a counterbalance weight that's going to go transfer over. And then on the opposite side, it gives you the stud and nut for the battery tray and the 2 mounting holes that go in the subframe. If you need this part or any other part for your car, head on over to 1aauto.com. Before I reassemble the new mount, I'm going to dismount this weight, counterweight that the manufacturer must put on there. I'm just going to transfer that over. Put the flat washer down, start this nut. I'm going to get a socket and tighten that right down. It's 12mm. There we go. Now I'm going to remove the 2 nuts on the mounting studs and the washers and set them aside, and I can go put this in the vehicle. Place that down in, put the 2 studs line up. Nice. Now I'm going to pre-spray these holes because we had some rust. I can start those by hand. Now I can put my flat washers and nuts on these two mounting studs. Flat washer first, then the mounting nut. Same on the other side. Flat washer and the mounting nut. I'm going to tighten down these first, make sure that's nice, firm, and solid in there, and then I will tighten up the nuts with washers on that bracket. It's a 15mm socket. I like to snug both bolts down before I give it the final tighten. Now I'm ready to move on to the two nuts with washers down below. They were 13mm socket. So with a 14mm socket, I'm going to tighten up the two lower nuts on those studs. To remount this bracket, we got it in and mount it. Let it slide down over the studs. It's 3 studs on the transmission side. Let those guide in. I'm going to tighten this because it cannot be off adjusted because the washers are cone shaped. So it's going to be mounted one way. And then I'm going to use my floor jack it up and put the main bolt through. Okay, so you have your 3 mounting nuts, but you have 2 seated cones. And you can see by looking at the mount where they sit. They have a raised steel seat, and that's going to sit in there, and there's one in the back. And that one's going to sit in there. And they'll center themselves right into place. Put the lock washer nut on top. One in the back. And then just start the one in the front. There's no washer or anything for the one in the front. It's just the nut that goes there. I'm definitely going to tighten these two before I tighten that one, because those are going to get seated with that cone-shaped washer. 17mm socket. Bottom the 2 back ones right in. Equals the amount of pressure. That way I know they're seated. So I tried to look up torque specs. The Axis I had, they give no procedure for R&R in it. They only tell you the time, the amount of time it takes. So I couldn't find any torque specs for this, but obviously it's an aluminum case and the studs are part of the transmission. So use the best of your ability just to know you tighten it, feel it, tighten out and bottom. Don't. If you use an air gun, there's a chance of you over tightening, cracking that transmission housing, which is not something that you really want to do. There we go. Okay, now with that all set, I'm going to put my harness connector back on. Now you can see the mounting bracket and the mount don't line up, so I'll use my floor jack and jack this up, and I can put my main bolt through. Now I can keep an eye on the mount, jack this up. Watch that line up in place. A little bit more right there, looks pretty good. Now with that lined up, the bracket and the mount, I'm going to put the main bolt through. Remember, the nut is welded on to this bracket. There's a little keyway to it with a counterweight. So that's going to go right in there. Might have to get a hammer to tap it. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go get a little hammer, see if I can tap that through. Now I can put that nut, line it up with the bolt, and I've got a 15mm ratchet wrench on the other side, and I'm going to start threading that bolt into that nut. Obviously being careful not to cross thread it. I don't feel any strong resistance there, so I'm lucky enough that I caught it on first thread. Yep, 15mm socket on my nice 1/2 inch breaker bar, and I'm just gonna really bottom that out, probably give it an extra quarter turn or half a turn. Feel that? That's good. With the motor mount tight, it's safe to just let down the floor jack and put it aside. So the new mount came with a nut for the stud that goes through the battery tray. I'll set that aside. I might end up using the original equipment because it has a nice washer to it, but that's really nice to supply that in case I did lose this or if it was rusted or broken. So we have to reconnect the harness to that link. There we go. There we go. There's a stud up there. Line those two up. I'm just going to clamp down that wiring harness. Two 10mm nuts with washers on. Start that one. Get this one started. Knowing that my negative cable is by the windshield and my positive cable is to the left of it, make sure I get the battery in the right position, not like that. It's one of those things you want to lift once. Put the handles down. I'm going to put the battery bracket on before I put the cables on. So this has the hook on it that goes on the inside of that plastic bracket, just like that. Let that slide over. Now, don't forget, I put the bolt in the spot where it belongs so that I wouldn't lose it. It's kind of tiny. Now I can line that up. Start that. Once again, this is a 10mm socket. Get ready to snug it down. That's nice and tight. I'm going to check this side. I'm going to give it one full turn. You never want to crush a battery. You'll bend the plates inside and you could short it out, damage it. I install the positive first. Make sure it's all the way down on the battery stud. Nice and snug. 10mm wrench. I'm going to tighten this up. Now, if I just rank on it and I bend that stud, that's going to do damage to the battery. So I like to put a negative force on the cable pulling up on it while I tighten that cable. Nice and tight. Put the protective cover boot on that. Then I'll move over to the negative side. Pretty much the same thing. Make sure it's all the way down, flush with the battery. Put a little negative force on that cable once it's snug. Negative force, I mean I'm pushing this way and it can bend that stud. So I'm going to push down on the cable while I tighten that nut. So you can see the 3 ears that push into the rubber bushings. And that's just going to pop right in. If you have any lubricating spray, like a penetrating spray or anything, just give it a shot to the rubber bushings. It'll help the plastic just get snapped down a lot easier. Now I have the air intake hose to the throttle body. I'm going to slide that on, and now I know that these are all lined up. I'm going to just snap it down. And that's how easy it was, because I pre-sprayed the rubber. Here is the emission tube from the valve cover. Line up the blue locks, just snap it on. And then we're going to just tighten the clamp on the throttle body and then plug in our mass airflow sensor. So the clamp on the air breather tube is a 10mm. You can also use a Phillips. Just snug that down. Then we have a connector for the mass airflow sensor. I'm going to connect that, let it snap. And this actually has a guide. Put put it on the other side of that clamp. But see the little ear here? They want you to put that harness in, which is a good idea. Stop it from rubbing and wear into the wires. So there you have it. We're all set.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.